Hi, listeners. Before we begin, just a note that this is an episode I intended to tell in one piece, but the details are so fascinating I couldn't fit it into one. But I don't want to cause any frustration, so this two-parter will be dropped today and tomorrow, so you won't have to wait long for the part 2. Here we go. Some crimes are so heartbreaking or shocking that they change laws, change society, or even earn the label Crime of the Century. But the stories that made headlines in decades past aren't necessarily remembered today. I'm Amber Hunt, a journalist and author, and in each episode of this show, I'll examine a case that's maybe lesser known today, but was huge when it happened. This is Crimes of the Centuries. On December 6, 2008, 28 years after she had technically been killed, Martha von Bülow died. Known as Sunny by her friends and everyone who mattered, maybe those were the same people, Mrs. von Bülow had had what can only be called an extraordinary life. She probably wouldn't have thought so because Sunny von Bülow, it seemed, had never felt she had much control over her life, and likewise, I'm guessing, her death. She was 76 and had been in a vegetative state for almost 3 decades. Shockingly and tragically longer than anyone could have ever expected. Born in 1931, Sunny was the only child of George Crawford, an older millionaire who knew everything about and dealt widely in the finding and distributing of natural gas, and his much younger wife, Annie Laurie Warmack. Sunny had grown up as few women who are not royalty do, with everything they could ever want, all the attention others could heap on them, with none of the worries that regular people face on a regular basis. Sunny Crawford did not want for anything. Protected by her bodyguard/chauffeur and either in the company of her mother or her nanny, Sunny was rarely alone as a child. Schooled in private establishments in Connecticut and Manhattan, her young life consisted of regular trips to her mother's box at the Metropolitan Opera. She wore expensive, even prim clothes to the playground where her little white gloves and handbag must have, even then, seemed a tad much for an 8-year-old. In the von Bülow affair, author William Wright notes that, when the time came for her to be presented to society, she already owned 35 ball gowns. Most other Debs had at best 5. It did not hurt that she was, by all accounts, also beautiful, blonde, and lithe, and while not well-educated, curious and well-read, though shy, which was likely insecurity rather than temperament, though it was hard to tell. It was extraordinarily bad luck that the manners she learned and the social milieu that surrounded her had the final say on how her life would go. That, after the first incident that prosecutors dubbed intentional, was not spoken of or dealt with by her or her family, or that the second incident would be handled in such a proscribed way as to perhaps undermine justice. Doing otherwise could have seemed rude, unseemly. It simply wasn't done. All of Sunny's gifts and all of her money could do nothing to change what happened. For 27 years, 11 months, and 15 days, she was kept alive by feeding tubes and round-the-clock nurses who turned her every 2 hours, bathed her every day, dressed her in fresh gowns, and changed the fragrant roses that were delivered daily. Fragrant being the operative word, in case she could still smell, while photographs of her children and grandchildren stared out at her, propped on her bedstand, a reminder that people still loved her. No matter that she was permanently huddled in a fetal position, never to return their love, never to tell what had happened. After December 21st, 1980, when she was found unconscious on her bathroom floor in her Newport, Rhode Island mansion on the sea, Sonny von Bülow's brain had not registered any activity. It was feared early on that she might not live long enough to see her husband imprisoned for the crime of trying to murder her, not once, but twice. Her husband's first trial in 1982 would draw enormous attention, including the new concept of in-court, all-day live TV coverage, at least 2 minutes of coverage every night on the nightly news on all 3 national television stations, and constant media attention in the European capitals she had once loved. Claus von Bülow was accused of causing his wife's death by injecting her with massive amounts of insulin. After the longest trial in Rhode Island history, he was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Poor Sonny was sentenced to just as much, waiting first in a private suite in a hospital, then later at an Upper East Side nursing home. She would never know that Claus may have tried to kill her and would suffer the enormous indignity of being convicted, nor would she know that soon after he would succeed in having the conviction reversed and a new trial ordered. Legally, he would be acquitted, but in the eyes of many, Claus von Bülow is a man who got away with an outrageously protracted murder. Crimes This Centuries is sponsored by Ibotta. Everyone, this is my partner Scott.
Hi, everyone.
He's going to help me do ads because when I use a product, chances are he uses it too because he lives here now. Now, Scott, tell the people what we have been complaining about so much lately.
Grocery prices.
That's right. Grocery bills are never fun, but lately they're straight up insane. And when you're shopping extra around the holidays, it's even worse, which is where Ibotta comes in because Ibotta lets you earn cash back on the things you buy.
Wow, really?
Yep, Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Think of how much extra holiday magic you can make this season with more room in your budget. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards.
This sounds great.
It is great. With Ibotta, you can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, or maybe Lowe's, or Macy's, or Sephora, or Best Buy.
I want in.
Perfect timing! Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code CENTURIES when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use the code CENTURIES. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code CENTURIES. The state of Rhode Island versus Claus von Bülow is considered one of the greatest cases of the 20th century, occurring just as old money New York society was taking its last gasps. The question we should ask, of course, is, was a crime even committed here? The verdict is in, but who really knows? I trust evidence, and there seems to be a lot of it here that said there was a crime, and a pretty heinous one at that. But that second trial, ordered up by the Rhode Island Supreme Court, found von Bülow not culpable for his wife's death, so he lived to be 92, dying just 5 years ago after agreeing to leave the country at his stepchildren's request to live in lesser opulence in London. Famed attorney Alan Dershowitz wrote a book about the case. He was one of Claus's attorneys the second time around, and so, yeah, he didn't think von Bülow did it. With all due respect, he also didn't think OJ did it. But let's get into it. After a childhood filled with wealth and privilege, Sonny Crawford married young in 1957 to Prince Alfred von Augsburg, a blonde Austrian of noble blood known for being a lady killer, though not that type, and a man's man and highly sought by the heiress crowd who didn't seem to care that he was broke. With him, Sonny had 2 equally beautiful children, and when he decided to claim his right as a European aristocrat and take a few mistresses, she opted out, only to marry a handsome, social-climbing lawyer whose man-about-town manners seemed to charm anyone he wished and alienate others in equal proportion. Claus von Bülow was not born into it, but he made it his business to get there, to where the rich were, with their leisurely lives and their nightly social life and their gentility and grace and obliviousness to anything that they determined didn't affect them. By the time Sonny met him, he was much better off financially than had been her penniless prince. He was also an English barrister of Danish blood, the son of a rather controversial man, as explained in the podcast Trashy Divorces.
His father was a drama critic who greatly admired the Germans even after they occupied Denmark. He gave a good name to a bad cause, says Claus about his father. He dined with the wrong people.
Now, Klaus's father wasn't a von Bülow. In fact, that wasn't Klaus's given name either. He was born Klaus Cecil Borberg, son of Sven Borberg, whom authorities accused of being a Nazi collaborator after the Second World War. Sven was sentenced to 4 years in prison for the crime, though he eventually would be cleared on appeal. Still, the stain on his name got him expelled from the Danish Dramatists Guild, the Danish Writers Association, and the Krux Blad Bog, a collection of autobiographies of Danish people of note. Now, if my genealogy research is on point, it appears Sven married, or at least partnered, with a woman prior to meeting Klaus's mother. That relationship produced a son born in 1916. 10 years later, he married Klaus's mother, Jana von Bülow-Plusko, the daughter of a Danish Minister of Justice and President of the Upper Chamber of the Danish Parliament for a spell. The marriage was in February 1926. Klaus was born that August. While he wasn't exactly an upper crust child, Klaus was a bright one, gaining acceptance at Cambridge Law when he was just 16. But he was not titled, and his family had lost a lot during the Second World War when they were forced to flee Denmark. A little later in life, he would adopt the von Bülow from his mother's side, maybe because he worried his father had sullied the Borberg name, though many assume it was more because von was traditionally a prefix that indicated nobility in European circles. Pretentious? Yeah. But he had a promising future. When he met Sonny, he was working as a right-hand man to J. Paul Getty, then the wealthiest man on the planet. If you're curious, yes, he was a member of the Getty family behind Getty News, as you can hear from this 1960 interview in which he ponders the nature of wealth. He was a wildly charismatic character.
Do you ever wonder, for instance, why you should be very rich and somebody else very poor?
I have wondered sometimes why some people who apparently have very good ability, work hard, never seem to make success of anything they do, and other people less brilliant somehow seem to make success.
We'll add some upbeat music here to wake you back up. Now, one could say that with her husband on the prowl, Sonny Crawford von Auersperg was ripe for the pickings, or that she was easy to fool, or that she was in love. Doesn't matter. She married von Bülow just over a year after her divorce, and because she did not wish to live in Los Angeles or London, where Getty had offices, he quit his work to become her full-time husband, decorator, social director, and image upholder. In both marriages, Sonny, then, was the money in the room. Sonny's father had died when she was just 4 and left her with $75 million, a lot of that in a trust. That'd be about $2 billion in today's money, for those of you keeping score. And she lived within her means, which meant for her that nothing much was out of it. When she became incapacitated in 1980, she owned a 14-room apartment at 960 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, today valued at about $60 million, and a 20-room oceanfront estate in Newport, Rhode Island, described by one newscaster as
the opulent von Bülow mansion at Clarendon Court in Newport.
You know a house is fancy when it has its own name. Clarendon Court, incidentally, sold a few years ago for $30 million. That 7-acre Rhode Island estate has sweeping ocean views, immaculately manicured gardens that stretched all the way to the cliff's edge, and is widely considered, per USA Today, quote, as one of the finest residences in America, end quote. When the house was built in 1904, this neighborhood on the sea was where the very rich retreated during the summer because, good God, it was so nauseatingly hot in New York. And it was where Sunny chose to spend the Christmas holidays, that one terrible winter when her second husband was in the midst of an affair and her marriage was about to end, when her children were needing her less and she had a brief thought about starting a catalog business that catered to her own class of customer. She was not happy. Fact is, no one who knew her would ever really have described her that way. But on the fateful day in late December 1980, she was where she understood the rules, however outdated they were becoming. Her greatest fear was that she was no longer as beautiful as she had been, and a world she must have imagined only valued her for that. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by iHerb. Hey Scott, you know the vitamins I take in the morning and the new shampoo and conditioner I just put in the shower?
I sure do.
Those came from iHerb.
Like a typical man, I just assumed they magically appeared overnight or were smuggled in by restocking gnomes. Wait, what?
No, silly, I got them from iHerb, which offers the best curated selection of wellness products at the best possible value across a variety of categories. Supplements, sports nutrition, groceries, and beauty and personal care.
It sounds like a one-stop shop for all my health and wellness needs.
Yep, and you can trust what you're getting from them because iHerb orders are shipped from climate-controlled fulfillment centers in the U.S., though they ship to over 180 countries, and they test and verify to ensure what you find in every bottle is what's supposed to be there.
That's important.
It sure is. Our listeners get 22% off their first order when you use code COTC at iHerb.com/shop/COTC. Existing customers receive 15% off. That's 22% off your first order at iHerb.com/shop/COTC. Use promo code COTC. Choose iHerb because wellness matters. In Sunny's first marriage, Alfie von Auersberg had done two things that managed to bring his wife great joy. First, he sired her 2 children, and second, he hired her a personal maid. That might not sound like a huge deal because Sunny, of course, was used to having hired help given her upbringing, but Maria Schwahammer was something special. She'd come highly recommended by the wife of a munitions baron. More than that, though, she would be devoted to Sunny for the rest of her life. Now, a forever-type relationship hadn't been the initial plan. Maria would later say on the stand,
"We arranged for 4 weeks.
For 4 weeks?
Yes.
And then after 4 weeks, why you...
They wanted me to stay.
And they asked you to stay on?
They asked me to stay on.
And you started first as a cook, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
But soon she did more than that. She would prepare and serve Sunny's breakfast, set out her clothing, and after handling morning details, spend hours with Sunny arranging flowers for every room in the apartment or estate, all selected for that reason, delivered fresh in New York, or picked from a vast array of cutting flowers that Sunny had planted on her Newport grounds. Later, during the trial, Maria would be asked if the two women confided in one another or were, quote-unquote, like sisters. Well, the professional in her scoffed at the very notion. The most she would say is that, quote, we liked each other, end quote. But Maria never forgot her place in Sunny's world, even while she would be the one who sought the truth behind her mistress's demise. The von Bülows were largely accepted into the highly demanding Newport social milieu. He was urbane and endlessly amusing, a dabbler in so many things that his conversation was always lively, informed, and delightful. A few found Claus a tad coarse and transparently obsequious, lacking a certain style and knowledge that separated those who really belonged to that echelon of culture and money and to those who merely pretended to it. Sunny must have been an unusual woman in several regards. It's reported that she was not at ease in the social realm, occasionally stopping by groups at parties that were amiably chatting, only to walk away after a few minutes, having said nothing. She did give her own share of parties, galas, and balls as required, remembering to fete those who were close and had birthdays, graduations, or other events that required celebrations of elegance and extravagance. She had only a few real friends, preferring her children. She had the two older children, Alex and Alla, with a prince, and a daughter, Cosima, with von Bülow. Let me just say that I found the name Cosima unusual, but then I was schooled. That name was very important in 19th century Europe. Seems that composer Franz Liszt had an illegitimate daughter named Cosima, who was married to celebrated conductor Hans von Bülow, who had a breathtaking collaboration with Richard Wagner, German composer and opera pioneer. Seems that the 19th century Cosima began having an affair with Wagner, who was a favorite of King Ludwig II of Bavaria, who did not approve of the relationship. Hans von Bülow divorced Cosima, who went on to marry Wagner. So she was a Liszt and a Wagner by way of a von Bülow. Sunny's daughter, Cosima von Bülow, then, was a rather highfalutin foo-foo name for those in the know. Learn something new every day. Know also that Cosima was only 11 when her father took a mistress and 13 when her mother became permanently comatose. Now, I know I've spent a good bit of time shoring up your understanding of who is involved in this crime, if it's a crime at all. But they were not like you and me, and that would make a world of difference to how this whole thing came down and how it came apart. Let us then start in 1978, when Klaus met with Alexandra Isles, who had been married to a Wall Street financier but was now divorced and living with her 12-year-old son in New York. She was an actress of small repute, having been on the daytime vampire-ridden goth soap opera Dark Shadows. Here's a snippet from the show. She played Victoria Winters, the second voice you'll hear.
What's the matter, Vicky?
It's Jeff. He's in jail. Someone has to post bail for him.
In jail?
Yes, a woman was murdered and we found her in his room. I know he didn't do it, but the police won't believe that.
Well, did he know who the woman was?
He said he'd met her a couple of times. Her name is Eve, but he didn't even know her last name.
Eve.
Do you know her?
No, of course not. Is there anything I can do, Vicky?
I wish there were. I just have to find some way of getting him out of jail.
Well, I'm sure. Go and find Roger. I'm sure he can help you.
All right.
What you just heard, in fact, was Alexandra's final scene as Vicky Winters. She left because she thought the role was a bit thin, and while the show's creators tried to replace her with two different actresses, audiences missed Alexandra and the role, and Vicky was written out within 40 episodes of Alexandra's departure. Now, Alexandra became one of the highest-profile mistresses of the 20th century, but as author Wright made note, that had never been a role she'd wanted to fill. Wright wrote that it was not, quote, Alexandra's style to be a mistress to a man in a highly visible marriage. If von Bülow's self-view as a grandee locked him into this marriage with Sunny, Alexandra's view as a respectable mother locked her into an insistence on his getting a divorce, end quote. This is when it all gets a little, well, interesting. It is now, folks pin it to July 1978, that Klaus starts telling people, in faux discreet mode, that his wife was depressed and had developed a serious problem with drinking. He took pains to tell her doctors this, even though they did not note any medical indication of the same when they examined her. But they jotted it down for future reference in records that would someday see the light of day. Claus was also limiting his wife's access to her friends, who assumed that Sonny was dodging them for some reason, and assumed it was, as Claus said, depression and alcoholism that was keeping her at home. He was meanwhile stepping out with Alexandra Isles. In May of 1979, the mistress wanted to see some movement toward the divorce he had long told her he was getting. He said with his wife's wealth and holdings and such, it was complicated. But Alexandra was losing interest.
And Alexandria's like, I'm not going to be your mistress anymore. You have 6 months to make it happen.
Interestingly, at around the same time, the usually highly reticent Sonny told her son Alexander, who was now 20, that things in her marriage were not good and she was likely to file for divorce soon. She told the same to Maria testifying again.
Where did she have this discussion with you?
In Newport, in her bedroom.
And do you recall how it came about that she said she discussed divorce with you?
Well, Mr. von Bülow went to London, and I slept downstairs in Mr. von Bülow's room for the time he wasn't there. And one evening, she said that she would like to get a divorce.
Did you respond to that in some way?
Well, I said, if the marriage is not happy, it's the best.
Did she tell you why she wanted a divorce?
She said that Mr. von Bülow is unhappy and he thinks it's her fault that he can't find a job. And she said she would like to be married to a successful businessman.
But nothing immediately came of it. The October deadline that Alexandra had laid down came and went. She was ready to move on, and she saw little of Claus that fall. Life in the von Bülow family trucked along. Sonny loved Christmas and always served her famous eggnog to any and all who came by during the holidays. On the day after Christmas, 1979, Alexander noticed that his mother was slurring her speech at dinner and, when speaking, could barely muster more than a whisper. Had she drunk too much of her famous nog? Almost no one thought so, least of all Alex, who knew that when his mother had a few too many, which was rare, he said, she would get chatty and louder, not slurry and weak. She was in bed that night by 8. When she did not show up the next morning per her usual routine, her maid, Maria, decided to go check on her, but was stopped by Claus, who said that his wife had not been sleeping well and now had a sore throat, and to just let her be. Mid-morning, when Maria heard Mrs. von Bülow moaning, she entered the room to find Sonny lying on the bed, her husband reading the paper beside her. She remembered telling Mr. von Bülow that Sonny was, quote, not sleeping. She's unconscious, end quote. He disagreed, telling Maria that Sonny had been drinking the night before and was sleeping it off. By this time, Maria had been with Sonny for almost a quarter of a century and knew her better than just about anyone. She was certain this was no hangover. Crimes of Centuries is sponsored by Miracle Maid. I just had guests over at my house and they all slept on awesome Miracle Maid bed sheets, and you know what? They were great. All of my guests, and I had 4 of them, said they slept well at my place, which is no easy feat in a house full of pets. I credit the sheets. That's because Miracle Maid sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. But that's not the only neat feature of these sheets. Miracle Maid offers a whole line of self-cleaning antibacterial bedding that prevent up to 99.7% of bacteria growth and require up to 3 times less laundering. Go to trymiracle.com/COTC to try Miracle Maid sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code COTC at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Maid. Go to trymiracle.com/COTC and use the code COTC to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, that's trymiracle.com/COTC to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Maid, for sponsoring this episode.
Christine Heron was 15 years old in the spring of 1993 when she disappeared, and in over 30 years there has been no trace of her.
I did know before the night was over she was dead, though.
A story of murder and heartbreak and investigative error.
He was 90% sure he was going to be convicted.
From CBC Podcasts, I'm David Ridgen, and this is Someone Knows Something.
After finding her employer unconscious and moaning in her bed, Maria Schwahammer tried to insist Klaus von Bülow call a doctor for his wife. Klaus said there wasn't one in Newport that time of year. Maria said there was. She said his name was Janis Gelitis and that he had been to the house a few times. Still, a fully dressed von Bülow demurred, sitting beside his wife as she lay there unconscious. When Gelitis was finally reached by phone at 3 p.m., Maria overheard von Bülow explain to the doctor that his wife had been drinking the night before and had gone to the bathroom a few times during the night, something that would indicate things couldn't be so dire. But Maria knew both of those claims were lies. The doctor said to call if things took a turn. By 6 p.m., Sonny had irregular breathing and what Maria termed as a rattling. She tried to pull Sonny up in bed. Von Bülow offered no help. Here's Maria answering questions put to her by a prosecutor about how she found Mrs. von Bülow that afternoon.
I shook her. I didn't get any response.
She didn't wake up?
No.
Was she still moaning?
She was still moaning. She was cold.
Klaus did agree to call the doctor, who arrived to find Sonny struggling to breathe and turning blue. He told Klaus to call an ambulance while the doctor worked to restore her heartbeat. Arriving at Newport Hospital at 7:30, doctors ordered a rash of tests and took blood for immediate testing. Her blood sugar and potassium were dangerously low. No alcohol or barbiturates were in evidence. She was given glucose injections to help rally her blood sugar levels, except her blood sugar continued to crater to around 20 milligrams per deciliter. How could this be? The only medical answer was that a massive amount of insulin had been introduced into her body and that it was devouring her blood sugar, which is the point of insulin as a drug for diabetics who produce too much. But where had this insulin come from? By the night of December 30th, Sonny's blood sugar was back up and she was conscious again. In order to ferret out what had caused her sudden decline while being watched by others, Dr. Gelitis asked Klaus a lot of questions, and because Klaus explained about her supposed drinking and what he said was debilitating depression, the good doctor suggested she see a psychiatrist immediately. One subsequently came to her hospital room and spent 20 minutes talking to her. More or less, it went like this. He asked if she was happy. No. If she was an alcoholic. Get out. If she tried to kill herself. No, but I often wish myself dead. What did she want for her future? Something more fulfilling than what she'd been doing. Now, get out. The psychiatrist decided she needed serious counseling. She didn't agree, but he dismissed that as reticence to be institutionalized. Sunny went home, none the wiser that she had been, and was still in some very serious danger, and it wasn't from drinking. Shortly after Sunny von Bülow came home from the hospital, her husband Klaus wrote a letter to Dr. Galitis seeking assurance from the doctor that he had done all he could to take care of and ultimately save his wife. It would look like a kind of written insurance should he ever need it in, say, court, that he had not refused to seek help until it was almost too late, and that he was a good husband in the doctor's eyes. Soon enough, though, that would be called back into question. On a February morning, Maria brought breakfast to Sunny only to find her employer in a bad way again, slurring her words, seemingly without ability to pull herself up in bed. Klaus blamed indigestion, and again, no doctor was called. Sunny improved, but Maria could not shake the feeling that things were somehow amiss. So she did what a lot of us would do. She decided to snoop. Though she maintained that she was just doing her job, looking in a closet to see if Sunny's ball gowns needed repairing, what she found in the rarely used closet was a black leather bag tucked up inside another bag. The black leather bag was zippered shut. She unzipped it, only to find a few prescription bottles made out to Klaus. There was one vial full of white powder and some kind of weird yellow paste in another. She made a note of what the bottles said they contained, then called Sunny's daughter to come over and take a look. Then they did what I'm guessing we all might have done now, take a few of the contents from the containers and hand them over to Sunny's primary New York physician, Dr. Richard Stock, who handed them to a lab for analysis. Turns out the powder was secobarbital and the paste was some weird Valium concoction that was highly irregular because why did anyone need a paste of Valium? Still, everyone calmed down a little bit because nothing here seemed to point at the problems Sunny had been experiencing. Klaus knew nothing of any of this. He was just living his life, even having started working for a Wall Street friend for almost no pay, in hopes of maybe returning to an active business life. Sunny then took the opportunity to give him $2 million to be his own money to do whatever he wanted with it. I'm going to guess this is something the rich do for their poor relations who have no source of income. In this case, though, why was a question that came into play during the trial. Was Sunny trying to make sure he didn't need the money he was supposed to get if she died? Was it a peace offering to a husband that had all along wanted to work? Was it a preamble to divorce? And why had he even accepted it? Sunny had tried to do this several times before, but Klaus had either declined or been talked out of it by tax advisors who explained that half of the $2 million would be eaten up by taxes. Let's file this under problems I do not have. On an April Sunday, when the family was home on Fifth Avenue, Sunny's speech again got slurred and she could barely walk. Maria called Sunny's mother, who called the doctor, infuriating Klaus. Sunny went into the hospital for observation, but came home without any tests showing her condition was the result of drug or alcohol abuse. On the lookout for some sort of pancreatic disorder, they found that she might in fact be hypoglycemic. But it was not something they could predict because when they tried, they couldn't induce it. It was, however, a possible diagnosis. Later, the question was if it was also an alibi. In any case, Klaus soon spoke to his wife, who later spoke to her longtime maid, explaining that she was never to call Sunny's mother or Sunny's doctor without the express permission of Mr. von Bülow. In a 1985 interview, Claus von Bülow spoke about his relationship with Maria.
I think Maria Schallhammer disliked me from day one and never missed an opportunity for indicating that to members of the household and so on. She was, in fact, a superb professional servant.
His relationship with Alexandra Isles was back on as she grew more confident that Sonny's depression and her supposed drinking, both which Alexandra felt she may have precipitated by sleeping with Klaus, were not the cause of that Christmas scare she'd had a few months earlier. There was a problem with this whole hospital story. Dr. Stock had not ordered tests on Sonny's blood until a week after she was admitted. A possible cause of the now third episode of weakness and confusion was no longer in her system. Proof only, I guess, that even the rich can't buy good health care in this country. I digress. And now Klaus was back, talking divorce, talking new beginnings. Alexandra figured he would soon be free. It's unclear how much Sonny knew about the affair. When her husband took a separate apartment in New York in the summer of 1980, she found out about that by accident when an expensive rug for it was charged to her accounts. She was upset, though she hadn't been sleeping with her husband for several years and considered it harmless. Again, no one in the family was talking about the herd of elephants in the room. Sonny's not in good health for whatever reason. Klaus won't ask her for a divorce, even though he wants one. He's in love with Alexandra, who's expecting a divorce at any time. Sonny knows she's being lied to. Her children think he might be gaslighting their mother, but won't confront him. All the while, they still dine together on occasion and attend the necessary social functions, donating to the appropriate charities and putting on good faces. Until Thanksgiving week, when the family was coming together, and Sonny went by her son's bedroom to tell him that she was going to go ahead with the divorce because she had found out something about Klaus that was, quote, too horrible to tell, end quote. She could not be convinced to tell Alex what that thing was. This led him and Maria to go skulking around in the closets, where they again found the black bag. Now, it contained a small glass vial familiar to every diabetic alive. Insulin. But no one had talked to the children about doctors' earlier suspicions that their mother had too much insulin in their system, so they didn't think much of it. See what I mean by no one telling anyone anything? Then it came December 1st. Sonny was feeling awful.
During the day, she was feeling very miserable with sinus and headache.
She took aspirin and stayed in bed all day, said Maria, who checked on her employer around 8:30 p.m. and was relieved to find her up watching television.
And how was she feeling at that time?
And she was feeling much better.
Not 3 hours later, though, things took a terrible turn. Maria checked on Sonny again, and this time found her bleeding profusely.
She was full with blood, and there was a big puddle of blood on the carpet, and she was laying on the bed.
She was lying on the bed?
Yes.
There was blood on the carpet?
On the carpet.
And where was the blood on her person?
She had a hole in the back of her head.
Once at the hospital, Sonny was shown to have more or less overdosed on aspirin, which can be a toxic substance in large amounts. It can cause lightheadedness, rapid breathing, fever, dehydration, low blood pressure, seizures, brain swelling. It's not pretty. The head wound was likely from falling, after which Sonny apparently had pulled herself back into her bed. Now, she had been taking aspirin during the day for a headache and sinus pain, so was the hefty dose self-administered? If so, was it intentional? Her husband's lover, Alexandra, wasn't sure, and it bothered her. She didn't know if she was the cause of Sonny's pain and possible self-medication. Having waited for 2 years at this point for Klaus to separate himself from Sonny, Alexandra found herself tortured by the fact that she might be the cause of all this ruckus and angst. She re-upped her ultimatum: either leave Sonny or lose me. You can't keep us both in limbo like this. It would appear that if Claus wanted to save this relationship, he had to do something fast. What happened next would lead to 2 trials of the century. To research this case, journalist Amy Wilson read The Von Bülow Affair by William Wright and Reversal of Fortune by Alan Dershowitz. She watched Reversal of Fortune because who doesn't love Glenn Close? She tracked down the August 1985 edition of Vanity Fair, which included a story written by Dominic Dunn called Fatal Charm, The Social Web of Claus von Bülow. She also read coverage of the ongoing trials. Crimes of the Centuries is available early and ad-free through Grab Bag Collab. Join us at patreon.com/GrabBagCollab to hear not just exclusive content related to this show, but to also get access to several other shows on our profit-sharing network. Unless noted in the citations, this case was researched and written by me, Amber Hunt, and produced by Amanda Rossman and Henry Lavoie. Original music is by Bruce Hunt, Andrew Higley, and occasionally by my son, Hunt Van Benscoten. Other music comes from Soundstripe and Epidemic Sound. If you like the show, help us out by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. For more information or to recommend a case, go to centuriespod.com. On Instagram, we're at centuriespod, and check out our Crimes of the Centuries podcast Facebook page.